fear is the result of getting caught in the middle. Buddha says it's the result of ignorance. And the ignorance is that when you start out as an infant with an undifferentiated awareness, and then you are taught who you are, that structure, which we call ego, is a very fragile structure. And it's a structure that is created of learned neural patterns. And it has on one side of it what Freud referred to as the id, or the impulse life. And on the other hand is this fragile structure in the face of tremendous forces externally, which are parents, social institutions, chaos and storms and nature, all of it. And if you can sense the way that works, just see on one side of you these extremely powerful impulses in you that you're afraid of, and on the other side, the tremendous forces outside that you're afraid of, and feeling yourself as a very fragile entity within that structure. When you didn't have a framework, when you didn't have a somebodyness, you are just part of the universe and there's no fear. So that the root of the fear is the separateness. The root of the fear is the model one has of oneself. That's where the fear starts. Once that exists, then you process everything from inside or outside in terms of that model, and it keeps reinforcing the feeling of vulnerability, because in fact there are incredibly powerful forces outside and inside. The transformative process of spiritual work is reawakening to the innocence of going behind that model that one had, that cut oneself off, that made oneself a tiny little fragile somebody. You say, I'm afraid of being socially shamed. But when you are socially shamed, it hurts, and then here we still are. You're afraid of violence, and then if violence happens, sure, it's scary and painful, and then behind it, here we are. Often, the fear feeds upon itself, and we're almost afraid of the fear, or the fear is the thing rather than what we're afraid of. We're just afraid. See, in a therapeutics tradition, what you usually do is try to figure out what you're afraid of. Another technique is this witness, which merely sits with the fear and tries to get it before it becomes so consuming that there's no space left. The image I usually use is, you got a painting of a cloud, of a gray cloud against a blue sky. But you only had one picture frame and it was a little too small. So what you did was you bent the canvas around to frame it. But in doing so, you lost all the blue sky. So you ended up with just a framed gray. It fills the entire frame. So when you look around, you say, I'm afraid, or I'm depressed. If you enlarge the frame so there was a little, even just a little bit of that kind of round thing of a cloud and a little blue space, you'd say, ah, a cloud. That's what the witness is. The witness is that tiny little blue over in the corner that leads you to say, ah, fear. Often we get so frightened, we can't stop for a moment to notice, ah, there's fear, because it's consumed us. So the art is to keep cultivating that witness, continuously cultivating it in all the opportunities you have, so that it is present more and more of the time. And when you focus on the witness rather than on the fear, you see that there's a part of you that is not afraid, that's just noticing. The noticer isn't judging it, it's not trying to change it, it's not even afraid, it's just noticing. So in a way, recognizing that there is a part of you that always exists that is not afraid. And in the deeper mystical sense, or transformative or spiritual sense, there is indeed a part of you that is always not afraid. Because there is a part of you that was never separate. How could you be afraid? You are everything. What could you be afraid of? It's all it is transformation of energy. It's just like a tree falling and then rotting and then providing nurturance for everything else in the forest and going on. And the tree isn't upset about its change of state. is the process of death, just seeing transformation of energy. Because once you get back into the mystical root being, your true self, it doesn't die. Because it wasn't born. It just is. So there's always a place that is not afraid, and that's what one works to find in oneself.